Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents An Everyone Culture, Becoming a Deliberately Developmental Organization by Robert Kegan and Lisa Laskow Lahey, with Matthew L. Miller, Andy Fleming, and Deborah Helsing. Narrated by Stephen R. Thorne. Introduction. Culture as Strategy. In an ordinary organization, most people are doing a second job no one is paying them for. In businesses large and small, in government agencies, schools, and hospitals, in for-profits and non-profits, and in any country in the world, most people are spending time and energy covering up their weaknesses, managing other people's impressions of them, showing themselves to their best advantage, playing politics, hiding their inadequacies, hiding their uncertainties, hiding their limitations. Hiding. We regard this as the single biggest loss of resources that organizations suffer every day. Is anything more valuable to a company than the way its people spend their energies? The total cost of this waste is simple to state and staggering to contemplate. It prevents organizations and the people who work in them from reaching their full potential. The organizations you will meet in this book, taken together, point the way to a qualitatively new model for people development, the single most powerful way we know of as developmental psychologists for an organization to unleash the potential of its people. And with what result? These exemplar organizations, taken as a whole, show us a picture of the following benefits: increases in profitability, improved employee retention, greater speed to promotability, greater frankness in communication, better error detection in operational and strategic design, more effective delegation, and enhanced accountability. Reductions in cost structures, political maneuvering, interdepartmental strife, employee downtime, and disengagement. Solutions to seemingly intractable problems, such as how to convert the familiar team of leaders, each looking out for his own franchise, into the more valuable but elusive leadership team. How to anticipate crises no one in the company has experienced previously and to successfully manage through them. How to invent and realize future possibilities no one has experienced previously. In short, this book is as much about realizing organizational potential as it is about realizing human potential. Most of all, this book describes a new model for the way each can contribute to the other, how organizations and their people can become dramatically greater resources to support each other's flourishing. Now, let's return to the ordinary organization where everyone works a second job of hiding imperfections. Consider it from the employer's point of view. Imagine you're paying a full-time wage for part-time work to every employee every day. Even worse, consider that when people are hiding their weaknesses, they have less chance to overcome them, so you must continue to pay the cost of these limitations as well, every day. Consider the second job from the employee's point of view. What does it cost you to live a double life at work every day, knowing you're not the person you present yourself to be? As human beings, we're set up to protect ourselves. But it is just as true that we're set up to grow psychologically, to evolve, to develop. In fact, research shows that the single biggest cause of work burnout is not work overload, but working too long without experiencing your own personal development. Now consider the drag or cap on personal development we create by hiding our weaknesses rather than having a regular opportunity to overcome them. In an increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, the so-called VUCA world, a world of new challenges and opportunities, organizations naturally need to expect more and not less of themselves and the people who work for them. But our familiar organizational design fails to match that need. How did we come to this observation about everyone in the ordinary organization doing a second job? Was it by staring hard at the ordinary organization? No. When you're staring very hard at the normal organization, it's hard to see anything but normal. Normal began to look strange to us only after we stared hard at organizations where no one is doing the second job. Different as the companies in this book are in their look and feel, they share a striking commonality. They are the most powerful settings in the world we have found for developing people's capabilities, precisely because they have created a safe enough and demanding enough culture that everyone comes out of hiding. This is what we call the Deliberately Developmental Organization, the DDO. An everyone culture. We, your lead authors, have devoted our professional lives to the study and advancement of adult developmental theory, which illuminates the gradual evolution of people's meaning-making systems and psychological capabilities. Developmental practitioners have known for years how to provide expert support to individuals on a one-to-one basis. However, little attention has been given to applying these principles and methods to an entire organization. From the start of our research team's investigation of the 3 DDOs at the heart of this book, we were struck by 3 things. First, all of them are doing what the science of human development recommends, and they are doing so in ingenious and effective ways, even though only one of the organizations explicitly studied the science. They seem to have an intuitive, practical grasp of how to accelerate people's development. Second, these organizations are taking these concepts to scale so that everyone in the organization, workers, managers, and leaders alike, has the opportunity to develop. In this book, not only will you meet 3 unusual organizations, you will also learn an explicit theory of human development that will help you better understand how these organizations' cultures impact their members. The theory will help you see under the organization's practices to the way they help people uncover, engage, and ultimately transcend the limiting assumptions and defensive routines that prevent us from developing our capabilities beyond our own expectations. In this way, should you have an interest in fostering or working in a deliberately developmental organization, you will have something more to guide you than a set of exemplary practices you may think to copy. You will have a crack-the-code understanding that may enable you to create practices that do not yet even exist. Finally, all 3 companies intentionally and continuously nourish a culture that puts business and individual development and the way each one supports the other front and center for everyone, every day. Delivered via their homegrown, robust daily practices, their cultures constitute breakthroughs in the design of people development and business strategy. A 21st century design for development. One way to think about this book is to view it as a 21st century answer to the question, what is the most powerful way to develop the capabilities of people at work? Executive coaching, high-potential programs, mentoring, corporate universities, offsites, retreats, and leadership development programs may sound like widely varying approaches, but they actually share enough common and problematic features to be seen as a single 20th century answer to the way we might best develop human capabilities. What are the features common to these approaches? First, they give people punctuated inputs, delivered from time to time rather than continuously. By themselves, they may not occur often or intensely enough. Given how daunting the project is to help people grow in fundamental ways, the application of the intervention may be too thin. Second, they constitute something extra, something beyond and outside the normal flow of work, an approach that raises the vexing problems of transfer and cost. Even if these activities support powerful learning in a context outside work, how do you ensure that employees transfer their new knowledge to the stubbornly durable context of business as usual? And how do you sustain the double costs of external inputs and employees' time away from the job? Third, these types of programs are provided only for a few, generally the 5 to 10% of employees who are designated high potentials, to say nothing of the way such a label indirectly writes off the potential of 90 to 95% of your workers. Finally, and above all, Notice that the 20th century answer to developing potential in all cases makes the individual and not the organization the point of dynamic entry. If the organization wants to significantly impact people's capabilities, it should apparently find something new outside the organization itself, some additive. Give them a coach, a program, a course, a mentor. The organization itself does not change. We might soup up the fuel through these additives, but the engine remains what it has always been. What is the alternative? Imagine so valuing the importance of developing people's capabilities that you design a culture that itself immersively sweeps every member of the organization onto an ongoing developmental journey in the course of working every day. Imagine making the organization itself, and not separate extra benefits, the incubator of capability. Imagine hardwiring development into your bottom line, so that along with asking whether your culture is fostering the other elements of business success, such as profitability or the consistent quality of your offering, you demand, that your culture as a whole, visibly and in the regular daily operations of the company, be a continuous force on behalf of people overcoming their limitations and blind spots and improving their mastery of increasingly challenging work. Imagine finding yourself in a trustworthy environment, one that tolerates, even prefers, making your weaknesses public, so that your colleagues can support you in the process of overcoming them. Imagine recapturing the full-time energies of your employees now joined to the mission of the enterprise. You're imagining an organization that, through its culture, is an incubator or accelerator of people's growth. In short, you're imagining a deliberately developmental organization. Being a DDO does not present a choice between focusing on individuals and focusing on the organization as a whole. In a DDO, coaching, leadership programs, and the like do not disappear. Instead, they become figures on the ground of a more comprehensively developmental culture. Development is not an additive. Instead, both the fuel and the engine are developmentally enriched. In this book, we show you the 21st century way to create a robust incubator for people's development. A strategic approach to culture. The intention of every DDO leader is crystal clear. He or she is working hard on the culture every day, as much to enhance the business as its employees. These leaders do not see two goals or two missions, but one. The relationship between realizing human potential and organizational potential in these companies is a dialectic, not a trade-off. We believe these companies have something provocative to teach about a new route to business success. You will find out not only how a DDO helps its people develop, but also how the DDO culture enables it to come up with original and effective means to meet its most vexing challenges and capitalize on its most promising opportunities. One of these companies, for example, is in an industry with an annual turnover of 40%. But this organization figured out a way, year after year, to get that figure into the single digits. Another entered a whole new industry in record time. A third may be the only company to have anticipated the economic crisis of 2008 and managed through it successfully. The distinctive quality of business challenges in a VUCA world is that they are as often adaptive as technical. Technical challenges are not necessarily easy, but they can be met by improvements to existing mindsets and organizational designs. Adaptive challenges can only be met by people and organizations exceeding themselves. We believe the DDO may be the single best means for meeting adaptive challenges. In short, you'll get a good look at culture as itself a business strategy. Planning your route through this book. Let's examine what you may want to consider as you choose the best sequence through the book. Chapter 1 drops you immediately into a ground-level experience of a DDO. As we guide you through the 3 organizations, we're trying to let you swivel your head in all directions to take in as many impressions as possible. The goal is not to be comprehensive or systematic, but to let the novelty jump out at you. Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Chapters 2 and 3 give you an aerial view of the deliberately developmental organization, including its conceptual underpinnings and its common features across companies. Chapter 2 drills down into what we mean by developmental when we speak of a deliberately developmental organization. Chapter 3 takes you through 12 common features of a DDO, grouped according to their developmental aspirations, practices, and sense of community. If you're a part-to-whole learner and want to experience the particular look and feel of something before you consider it more generally and conceptually, you'll probably most appreciate the inductive sequence through the first 3 chapters, as we have laid it out. But if you prefer to see the big picture before you look at living instances, as whole-to-part learners do, you may prefer a more deductive sequence, beginning with chapters 2 and 3, and then moving to chapter 1. Chapter 4 is a deep dive into the practices that the exemplar companies have created to support their deliberately developmental cultures. You will understand these practices better after you've listened to the chapter on developmental theory, chapter 2. But if you're most interested in an off-the-ground account of life in a DDO, you may want to go directly from chapter 1 to chapter 4 and then to chapter 5. Chapter 5 addresses the strictly business value of a DDO. Yes, I see how such an organization may be a fantastic experience for the employee, you might say, but is this really any way to run a business? This chapter addresses whether the exemplar businesses succeed despite the attention they give to personal development or because of it. Chapter 6 gives you a direct experience of your own growing edge so that you might consider firsthand the kind of personal learning a DDO would collectively encourage and support for you. If, after finishing Chapter 4 on DDO practices, you find yourself wondering about your own blind spot or about the kind of discomfort you would have to manage were you in a DDO, you might want to go directly to Chapter 6 and then come back to Chapter 5. If all the preceding chapters have created in you an interest in moving your workplace, your team, department, or whole enterprise more in the direction of becoming a DDO, then Chapter 7, the final chapter, gives you pictures of the ways we have seen organizations choose to get started. The rise of the new incomes. We live in unprecedented times. Alongside the seismic shifts of the VUCA world are equally significant shifts in what people are looking for when they go to work each day. Gone are the days when payoffs to economic man alone, to the material self, to greater agency in the external world, were enough. In those days, conventional incomes, such as paychecks, health benefits, and limits to the hours in a work week, sufficed. Now, we're seeing the pursuit of new incomes, personal satisfaction, meaningfulness, and happiness. These are the payoffs to the psychological person, to the intangible self, to fulfillment in the interior world. Paychecks, bonuses, and benefits will always matter, of course, but increasingly, they're not enough for many of us. The rise of the new incomes may represent the biggest shift in the work-reward equation since the emergence of the labor movement in the 19th century. That whole countries, and even the United Nations, are now exploring the development of measures like GNH, gross national happiness, a qualitatively different way of measuring success, as well as GNP, is evidence of the robustness of the new incomes. But what is happiness? The definition most in vogue, fueled by the positive psychology movement, is one of happiness as a state characterized by pleasure, a banishing of pain, suffering, and boredom, a sense of engagement and meaning through the experience of positive emotions and resilience. This is the dominant version of the new incomes sought and paid in the most widely celebrated great places to work. Think of flexible work hours, pool tables and dartboards, dining areas run by chefs serving fabulous and nutritious food at all hours, frequent talks by visiting thought leaders, spaces for naps, unlimited vacation time. However, the research literature on happiness suggests another definition, one that is overlapping but significantly different. The second definition sees happiness as a process of human flourishing. This definition, whose roots go back to Aristotle and the Greeks' concept of eudaimonia, includes an experience of meaning and engagement, but in relation to the satisfactions of experiencing one's own growth and unfolding, becoming more of the person one was meant to be, bringing more of oneself into the world. Just as labor pains are part of bringing new life into the world, the process of human development, of seeing and overcoming one's previous limitations, can involve pain. Unlike happiness as a state brought on by experiencing only the so-called positive emotions, happiness as a process of development includes the experience of loss, pain, and suffering, rather than standing in contrast to it. This other kind of happiness may be less fashionable in a world entranced with pleasure, stimulation, and the avoidance of pain, but for anyone who has tasted it, as our DDO informants testify, it is a treasured income of surpassing value. People find themselves experiencing pleasure and aliveness in new, unexplored terrain, with a heightened sense of awareness and presence, even as they engage their most difficult moments. The workplaces we call deliberately developmental organizations are delivering this second kind of new income in settings that expressly attend to the process of human development. Their cultures include everyone in this process, everyone experiencing their own unfolding, but equally important, everyone witnessing, supporting, and at times even provoking this unfolding in others. Although it is occasionally difficult or unsettling for individuals to face old, unproductive patterns or vulnerabilities, people experience an overall sense of shared excitement and energy, forward movement and growth of themselves, their colleagues, and the organization. It is far too soon to settle in the reorganization of work for what amounts to experiments confined to a single conception of happiness. As an experiment in new ways to organize work, the workplace built for flourishing stands shoulder to shoulder with the workplace built for well-being. These workplaces may one day marry, or they may not, but they should be mutually supporting, each taking an interest in and cheering for the other, as together they lead a common movement to repay, with a new income, the gift of our labor. The workplace built for well-being has already begun to claim a space in the public imagination. We believe this is only half the mansion. We invite you to take a grand tour of the workplace built for flourishing, the other half of the house of human happiness. Chapter 1. Meet the DDOs. You know how there are people, when they realize that vulnerability is important, they kind of walk right toward it? Well, first, that's not me, and second, I don't even hang out with people like that. Vulnerability is at the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness, but it appears it is also the birthplace of joy, of creativity, of belonging, of love. Brené Brown, University of Houston. In this chapter, you'll get inside 3 deliberately developmental organizations, DDOs. You'll meet some of the people who call them home, leaders, new recruits, and experienced employees. Some of these people will appear again in later chapters. You won't get a comprehensive top-down introduction to the companies or to the general idea of the DDO. Instead, you'll get the closest thing, in book form, to a quick immersion, what you might see if you were plunked down in the middle of one of these companies. Before we enter, a few words of preparation. Are you the rarer kind of person Brené Brown, author and researcher at the University of Houston, describes as valuing the experience of your own vulnerability and running right toward it? If you are, Your only risks are being too sure you understand fully what you're seeing, or too quick to suspend your critical faculties and automatically endorse what you think these people are trying to do. But if you are, like most people, more wary of feeling vulnerable, ashamed, and unworthy, especially at work, you might find yourself feeling alarmed soon after you enter. That might be the case, especially if you happen to be a leader in an organization and you feel you don't have the luxury of being vulnerable. I have people counting on me, people who need me to have it together. In any case, none of us chooses or decides to be alarmed. It happens automatically. Once alarmed, any of us will, as the neuroscientists have taught us, just as automatically protect ourselves. If you feel alarmed, you might protect yourself by fleeing, perhaps by putting down the book and finding something else to do. But more commonly, you'll flee while continuing to listen, by distancing yourself from what you're hearing. Your mind might begin looking for reasons to conclude there is actually nothing novel here. This sounds a lot like what we're already doing, or I've heard this all before. Or you might find yourself thinking, this manner of working is the most exotic of rare flowers, unlikely to grow in any other soil, and thus not really worth thinking any more about, since it would be impossible for most people or organizations. Or you might protect yourself by fighting, finding yourself on the attack without a declaration of war. Somehow, before you know it, your mind is doing whatever it can to take apart what is being built in front of you. These people are crazy, your mind might say, or this is too extreme, or this is too X, or this violates my belief that Y, or my value for Z. All these reactions are fine. Many of your thoughts that come up in this chapter deserve careful consideration, and we've made space in future chapters to do that. The important thing is for you to realize that when these thoughts arise automatically, you're not considering them. You're not even having them. Rather, they are having you. They are taking over. All we ask is that you keep track of these automatic reactions, know that you will explore them in future chapters, and not let them be your whole experience as you try to stay present in the places we invite you to explore. In a sense, it will be wonderful if you do find yourself having these reactions, because you will begin to experience the first kind of work everyone must do in a DDO, to take responsibility for the workings of our minds so that we can stay present, so that we can stay at work. It's also important to say that the exemplar companies are, in many respects, very different from one another. Each does business in a different industry, entertainment and real estate, e-commerce, and hedge fund investing. There are striking differences in the feel and operation of each company. If Bridgewater Associates might be glibly characterized as a cross between business and the Navy SEALs, then the Decurion Corporation might be seen as a cross between business and the wisdom traditions of the East and the West. Next Jump Inc. has a no-firing policy and an explicit commitment to stand by employees through thick and thin. You wouldn't fire your children from your family, Charlie Kim, its leader, often says. But Bridgewater is equally explicit in saying, we are up for growing people, not rehabilitating them. Some people have to go. In thinking about its operations, Bridgewater makes continuous use of the metaphor of the machine, an analogy you would never hear at Decurion. Next Jump is in some ways proudly non-exceptionalist. The two top leaders talk about not being the stars growing up in their own families or schools. Bridgewater's leaders believe you become a 1 in 10,000 company by hiring 1 in 10,000 type people. In short, a DDO can come in many flavors. But even though each DDO may have its own feel, may have taken a different path to its current culture, and may have evolved its principles and practices independently, it's striking how much they have in common. There's no single right way to be a DDO, no simple recipe of programs, policies, incentives, and perks, but there are deep assumptions that run through all the DDOs, assumptions about the possibility and value of growing in adulthood, ways of structuring people's growth directly in their work, ways of helping people get the most out of giving and receiving feedback and coaching, ways of making people development and business development.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?